The warning lights came first. Governor Patricia Whitmore was reviewing the quarterly mineral output reports when her assistant burst through the door, face pale. "Governor, we have multiple ships dropping out of FTL at the system edge. Big ones." Patricia's stomach dropped. New Canaan had no defenses to speak of. They were miners, engineers, families trying to build a life in the asteroid belt humanity had claimed 15 years ago. She pulled up the sensor display and felt her blood run cold. 17 vessels, each massing more than anything in Earth's Navy. The angular, bronze-colored hulls were unmistakable. Vrex Consortium. "Open a channel," Patricia ordered, forcing her voice steady. 47,000 people on this station were looking to her for leadership. "Let's find out what they want." The face that appeared on screen was reptilian, scaled in patterns of deep green and gold. His eyes were large and dark, unblinking. "I am Trade Master Kelvin of the Vrex Consortium. You are occupying territory subject to outstanding financial obligations." Patricia blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "This is New Canaan Colony, sovereign human territory. We've filed all the proper claims with—" "Your claims are irrelevant." Kelvin's voice carried the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "This system was leased to the Fen Collective 293 years ago. The Fen incurred debts of 2.3 million consortium credits before their extinction. Under consortium law, debts associated with territorial holdings pass to subsequent occupants." The words took a moment to process. "You're saying, because some species that's been dead for over a century owed you money, we now owe you that money, correct? As you have failed to satisfy this obligation, we are here to collect. Your colony, its inhabitants, and all assets are hereby seized as collateral pending debt resolution." Patricia's hands gripped the edge of her desk. "You can't be serious." "We never agreed to any debt. We've never even heard of the Fen. Ignorance of consortium financial law is not a valid defense. You have 1 hour to prepare your people for relocation to debtor-holding facilities. Resistance will be noted and will increase the outstanding balance. Cooperation will be noted favorably." The screen went dark. For 10 seconds, Patricia sat frozen. Then training took over. She hit the colony-wide alert. "This is Governor Whitmore. This is not a drill. All residents proceed to designated assembly points immediately. We are being forcibly evacuated. I repeat, this is not a drill." The Vrex were efficient, she had to give them that. They didn't murder anyone. They didn't even threaten violence. They simply herded 47,000 human beings onto their ships like cattle, processed them with bureaucratic precision, and stripped New Canaan of every piece of equipment, every ounce of refined minerals, every belonging not physically attached to a person's body. Families were separated during processing. Children cried for parents. Elderly colonists struggled with the pace the Vrex demanded. Through it all, Kelvin's subordinates maintained the same detached, professional demeanor. This wasn't cruelty, this was just business. As Patricia was led onto the detention vessel, she caught Kelvin's eye. "You're making a mistake." The trade master's head tilted slightly. "The mistake was yours, Governor. You should have researched the territories you expanded into. The galaxy operates by rules. It is time your species learned them." The message reached Earth 17 hours later. Admiral James Park received it first, his aide practically running into his office aboard the EDS Indomitable. Park was reviewing fleet readiness reports when he saw his aide's expression. "What is it?" "Sir, it's New Canaan, the Vrex have. They've taken the colony, all of it." Park was on his feet before the aide finished speaking. "Taken? What do you mean taken?" "They seized it, sir. Some kind of debt claim. 47,000 civilians in custody." The admiral's jaw set. He was Korean-American, descended from a line of military officers stretching back 6 generations. His great-grandfather had fought in the Third Corporate War, back when such conflicts were confined to Earth. Park had joined Earth's Navy because he believed in protecting humanity's interests as they expanded into a galaxy that didn't always welcome them. And now some alien corporation had kidnapped an entire colony. "Get me the Secretary General," Park ordered, "and begin fleet mobilization protocols. I want every available ship ready to move within 6 hours." "Sir, we don't have authorization to." "I said begin the protocols, Lieutenant. We'll get authorization." The aide hesitated, then saluted and ran. Park stood at his window, looking out at the fleet arrayed around Earth. Humanity had come far in 80 years since first contact. They'd built ships, established colonies, earned grudging respect from species that initially dismissed them as primitive. But they were still the newcomers, still learning the rules of a galactic community that had existed for thousands of years. Rules that apparently included letting the powerful rob the weak, as long as the paperwork was in order. His communicator chimed. "Admiral, Dr. Elizabeth Okonkwo is requesting to speak with you. She says it's urgent regarding the New Canaan situation." Park frowned. He knew the name. Okonkwo was one of Earth's top negotiators, former corporate lawyer turned government diplomat. Put her through. The woman who appeared on his screen was in her mid-40s, dark-skinned with close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. Her eyes were sharp, analytical. "Admiral Park, I understand you're preparing to take the fleet to New Canaan. The moment I get authorization, yes. I need you to hold that thought." Okonkwo's voice was calm, measured. "I've spent the last 3 hours reviewing every available piece of information on this situation. If you go in with guns blazing, you'll give the Vrex exactly what they want." Park's expression hardened. "They've taken 47,000 of our people hostage. They've taken them into custody under what they claim is legal authority. There's a difference, a small one but significant." Okonkwo leaned forward. "The Vrex Consortium isn't a government, Admiral. They're a corporation that became so powerful they function like one. They don't want war with us. War is expensive, unpredictable. They want us to acknowledge their authority. If we attack, we prove we're violent primitives who don't understand civilized galactic commerce. Every species that trades with the consortium will back them because the alternative is acknowledging that might makes right. And if we don't attack," for the first time, Okonkwo smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then we show them what human economic warfare actually looks like. I need to brief the Secretary General. Can I count on you to keep the fleet ready but hold off on any action until we've had a chance to try this my way?" Park studied her for a long moment. Every instinct screamed at him to take his ships and bring those people home by force. But he'd worked with enough diplomats to recognize the look in Okonkwo's eyes. She had a plan. "How long?" he asked. "Give me 2 weeks to set the groundwork. If it doesn't work, you can have your war." 1 week, Park countered. "Not a day longer," Okonkwo nodded. 1 week, thank you, Admiral." The screen went dark. Park returned to the window, watching his fleet. Soon, he thought, one way or another, those people would come home soon. Dr. Elizabeth Okonkwo had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, not this specific crisis. She couldn't have predicted the Vrex would pull something so brazen. But she'd known that eventually, some established galactic power would try to put humanity in its place. The galaxy had rules, and those rules were written by and for species that had been playing this game for millennia. Humanity was the newcomer, and newcomers got tested. The meeting room in Geneva Station was packed. Secretary General Hassan, Ambassador Maria Torres, Admiral Park via hologram, and a dozen other Earth officials, all waiting to hear what she had to say. Okonkwo stood at the head of the table, a holographic display floating before her. The Vrex Consortium controls approximately 40% of galactic trade. They're not the largest trading organization, but they're the most aggressive. They've built their power through a combination of favorable contracts and legal manipulation. She pulled up a document, thousands of pages long. "This is the Consortium's standard trade agreement. Earth signed a simplified version of this 80 years ago. We agreed to basic trade terms, currency exchange rates, tariffs. What we didn't agree to, because it wasn't in our version, is Article 47, subsection 12, the inherited debt clause." Ambassador Torres leaned forward. She was Spanish, early 50s, with the kind of diplomatic experience that came from years of navigating galactic politics. "They're claiming we agreed to something we never signed. They're claiming that by trading with them at all, we implicitly agreed to their entire legal framework. It's extortion dressed up as law." Okonkwo's expression was grim. "And it's worked on dozens of species before us. The Vrex have been doing this for centuries. They find some obscure debt, some legal technicality, and use it to seize assets from species too weak or too inexperienced to fight back." "So what do we do?" the Secretary General asked. "We can't let them keep our people. We can't attack them either, Okonkwo said, glancing at Park. Not yet. An attack would unite every consortium trading partner against us. We'd be seen as pirates, raiders, a threat to the established order. Then what's your plan? Park's voice was tight with barely controlled frustration. Okonkwo's smile returned. We beat them at their own game. The Grand Exchange is the neutral body that oversees major trade disputes. Under their rules, if a debt is formally challenged, the creditor must prove their claim, and if an audit is requested, all the creditor's assets are frozen until the audit is complete. Secretary General Hassan's eyes widened. You want to audit the entire Vrex Consortium. I want to bury them in the most thorough, exhaustive, painful audit in galactic history. Okonkwo pulled up another display, this one showing a complex web of financial transactions. For the past 3 years, my team has been analyzing every public consortium financial record we could access. We've found thousands of questionable transactions. We can't prove they're illegal, but we can certainly demand they be investigated. How long would this audit take? Torres asked. As long as we want it to. 18 months minimum. During that time, the consortium's assets are frozen. They can't conduct new business. Their existing contracts continue, but they can't expand, can't leverage their capital, can't do any of the things that make them powerful. Okonkwo looked around the table. We strangle them slowly, and while they're tied up in legal proceedings, we offer the galaxy an alternative. She pulled up the final slide, a logo and charter for something called the Terran Trade Collective. We're going to become the competition. Trade Master Kelvin received the formal challenge 3 days after seizing New Canaan. He was in his office on Vrex Prime, reviewing the processing status of the human colonists, when the notification arrived from the Grand Exchange. At first, he assumed it was a formality. Species challenged consortium authority regularly. The challenges were always dismissed. The consortium's legal team was the finest in the galaxy, their contracts airtight. Then he opened the document and saw the size of it. The humans were requesting a comprehensive audit of all consortium financial activities for the past 500 years. They'd identified 47,000 transactions requiring investigation. They'd filed formal complaints about contract enforcement disparities. They'd questioned the legitimacy of the inherited debt clause itself, arguing it violated the principle of informed consent that the Grand Exchange supposedly held sacred. And under Grand Exchange rules, until these challenges were resolved, the consortium's accounts were frozen. Kelvin immediately called an emergency council meeting. The consortium's governing body consisted of 17 trade masters representing their most powerful member species. They convened virtually, their holographic forms filling the chamber on Vrex Prime. "This is absurd," Kelvin told them, projecting calm confidence he didn't entirely feel. "The humans are throwing a tantrum. The audit will take a few weeks at most, will be proven legitimate, and they'll be forced to acknowledge our authority." "Are you certain?" This came from Trade Master Jolex, a methane-breathing species whose hologram was filtered through translation software. "The humans have a reputation for unpredictability. They're children playing at galactic politics," Kelvin insisted. "Yes, they're clever. Yes, they've made some impressive technological advances. But they've been part of the galactic community for barely 80 years. We've been doing this for 800. Trust me, this will blow over." In the back of the chamber, junior arbitrator Thelm watched in silence. He was young for a Vrex, barely a century old, and his position gave him no voting authority in council matters. But he'd been studying humanity extensively since their first contact, and something about this situation worried him. Humans didn't think like other species. Most civilizations achieved spaceflight after developing peaceful, unified societies. Humans had achieved spaceflight while still divided into competing nations, while still waging wars against each other. They'd spent thousands of years perfecting the art of conflict before ever leaving their planet, and now they were bringing those skills to bear against the consortium. Thelm kept his concerns to himself. Trade Master Kelvin wouldn't listen. None of them would. They were too confident in their own system, too certain that the rules they'd spent centuries refining were unbeatable. The meeting adjourned. Kelvin returned to his work, already dismissing the human challenge as a minor nuisance. 3 weeks later, the first cracks began to show. David Reeves was 32 years old, British, and possessed the kind of analytical mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos. He'd made a fortune in xeno-economic arbitrage before Earth's government recruited him for exactly this kind of situation. Now he stood before the Grand Exchange's Audit Committee, surrounded by representatives from 70 species, and calmly explained why the Vrex Consortium's entire economic model was built on exploitation. The inherited debt clause has been enforced 847 times in consortium history, Reeves said, his presentation floating in holographic glory for all to see. Of those 847 enforcement actions, 0 were against species from the core regions. 0 were against consortium founding members. Every single enforcement targeted newer species, peripheral civilizations, populations with limited galactic political influence. He pulled up a comparison chart. While core region species have defaulted on consortium contracts 1,247 times in that same period, they receive payment extensions, debt forgiveness, restructured terms. The inherited debt clause was never invoked. A murmur ran through the chamber. Reeves continued, his voice never rising, never showing emotion, just presenting facts. This isn't about law, it's about selective enforcement. The consortium applies rules to benefit the powerful and punish the weak. That's not a legal system, that's a protection racket. The Vrex representatives objected, of course. They presented their own data, their own arguments, but Reeves had done his homework. For every consortium claim, he had a counterexample. For every legal precedent they cited, he found 3 that contradicted it. The audit, originally estimated to take a few weeks, was expanded to 6 months, then 12. The Grand Exchange couldn't ignore the evidence Reeves was presenting. Even if the consortium hadn't technically broken any laws, the pattern of behavior he documented was damning. And while the audit ground forward, Okonkwo's team was implementing Phase 2. Ambassador Tours visited the Kalish homeworld personally. The Kalish were mid-tier traders, not particularly powerful but well-connected. They'd been consortium members for 3 centuries. "We're not asking you to take sides," Tours told their trade minister over an elegant dinner. "We're simply sharing information. Did you know the consortium charges your species 3% higher interest rates than species from the core regions? It's buried in subsection 47C of your contract." The Kalish minister's expression shifted. "That can't be right." Tours slid over a data pad. "Here's the documentation. Compare it to the standard core region contract. The terms are significantly different." She visited 14 more species in the following months. Never pushing, never demanding, just sharing information, pointing out the ways they'd been quietly exploited for years. Some species dismissed her. They'd been consortium members so long they couldn't imagine an alternative. But others started asking questions, started reviewing their own contracts with suspicious eyes. And when Earth announced the formation of the Terran Trade Collective, offering transparent contracts, lower interest rates, and equal treatment for all members, some of those species started to listen. The first defection came 5 months into the crisis. The Plenok Unity, a small trading confederation, formally withdrew from the Vrex Consortium and signed with the TTC. They were minor players, barely relevant in galactic trade terms, but they were the first crack in the dam. 2 more species followed within weeks, then 5 more, then a mid-sized trading partner that handled 7% of consortium mineral rights. Trade master Kelvin watched his empire begin to crumble and felt something he'd never experienced before, genuine fear. He called Theln to his office 6 months into the crisis. The junior arbitrator had been right, and Kelvin was finally ready to admit it. "How did this happen?" Kelvin asked, staring at the display showing the consortium's declining market share. They were down to 70% of their original trade volume, and the trend was accelerating. Theln had prepared for this conversation for months. "They studied us, every contract, every precedent, every loophole we've ever exploited, and then they built something better. But they're one species." Kelvin's composure finally cracked. "We're an alliance of 47 civilizations." We have 800 years of history. They have 10,000 years of history, Theln said quietly. Just because they only recently left their planet doesn't mean they haven't been doing this to each other since before we even discovered fire. Trade wars, economic sanctions, competitive deregulation. These are tools they mastered millennia ago. We thought we were sophisticated because we used contracts instead of weapons, but they weaponized the contracts themselves. Kelvin stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying we can't win this, not the way we've been fighting it. Every day this continues, we lose more trading partners. The Terran Trade Collective is eating our market share. And if we harm those colonists, if we escalate to violence, we give Earth exactly the excuse their admiral has been waiting for. Then what do? We negotiate. Actually negotiate, not just posture. Because if we don't, in another 6 months there won't be a consortium left to save. High Executor Vrex was the closest thing the consortium had to a supreme leader. He was old, even by Vrex standards, and had overseen the consortium's expansion for the past 2 centuries. He'd built much of its current power structure, and now he watched that power structure crumble. The emergency council session was tense. Market share had dropped to 52%. 11 major trading partners had defected to the TTC. 3 more were openly negotiating. The audit had uncovered nothing explicitly illegal, but the pattern of selective enforcement Reeves had documented was so damaging that the Grand Exchange was discussing sanctions. We need to make an offer, Trade Master Jolek said. Return half the colonists as a gesture of good faith. Negotiate a reduced debt payment. Absolutely not, Kelvin snapped, even though he'd been thinking the same thing. That shows weakness. It proves their strategy worked. Their strategy did work, Theln said, speaking up with an authority his junior rank didn't usually grant. We lost this conflict months ago, we just haven't admitted it yet. Vrex listened to them argue, his ancient eyes calculating. Finally, he raised a hand for silence. Trade Master Kelvin, prepare a formal offer. We return half the human colonists immediately. Earth pays half the claimed debt. We both save face, and we end this before it destroys us. The offer reached Dr. Okonkwo 4 hours later. She was in her office on Geneva Station, surrounded by displays showing the current state of galactic trade. The Terran Trade Collective now controlled 31% of galactic commerce. Other trading organizations, sensing opportunity, had taken more. The Vrex Consortium was down to 35% and dropping. She read the Vrex offer, then looked at David Reeves, who sat across from her. What do you think? They're desperate, Reeves said. Market projections show them becoming irrelevant within 18 months if this continues. This offer is them trying to stop the bleeding. So we've won. We've won the economic war, but we haven't gotten our people back. Okonkwo nodded slowly. That was the only thing that mattered, really. Not the market share, not the TTC success, not the consortium's humiliation. Just bringing those 47,000 people home. She opened a communication channel to Vrex Prime. High Executor Vrex, I decline his offer. All our people, full compensation for their suffering and a formal apology, or we continue. The response came back within minutes. Vrex himself appeared on screen. Dr. Okonkwo, you're being unreasonable. We're offering you a fair compromise. Fair, Okonkwo's voice was cold. You kidnapped 47,000 civilians, including 6,000 children. You held them in detention for 7 months. You traumatized families and destroyed lives. And you want us to pay you for the privilege of getting half of them back. We acted within the rules you wrote to benefit yourselves. We're not interested in compromise, Executor. We're interested in justice. Return our people, acknowledge you overstepped your authority, and we'll end this. Or we'll dismantle everything you've built, contract by contract, trading partner by trading partner, until there's nothing left. Vrex's expression hardened. You destabilize the entire galactic economy just to prove a point. We'd restructure the galactic economy to be fairer, more transparent, and less exploitative. If that destabilizes your power base, that's your problem, not ours. Then we'll dissolve the consortium entirely, shut it all down. The resulting chaos will harm everyone, including your new trading partners. You'll be blamed for the economic devastation. Okonkwo had been waiting for this threat. She smiled. Go ahead. Dissolve it. We've already made contingency plans. She sent him a file. 40 of your 47 member species have indicated they'd transfer to the TTC if the consortium collapses. We've been negotiating with them for months. You're not holding the economy hostage, executor. You're holding a gun to your own head." Vrance stared at her, and for the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to be outmaneuvered. "You planned this from the beginning. The moment you took our people, we started building your replacement. You gave us no choice." Okonkwo leaned forward. "This ends one of two ways, executor. You return our people and accept the reforms we're proposing, or you destroy yourselves trying to maintain power you no longer have. Your choice." The channel closed. 3 days later, the Vrex Consortium capitulated. The agreement was signed at the Grand Exchange, with representatives from dozens of species present to witness. All 47,000 human colonists would be returned to New Canaan immediately, with full compensation for their detention. The consortium would pay for repairs and reconstruction of the colony. The inherited debt clause would be formally nullified, not just for humans but for all species. And an independent oversight committee, with human representation, would review consortium contracts going forward to ensure fair enforcement. Trade Master Kelvin was forced to resign. Junior arbitrator Thelm, who'd seen the danger early and ultimately helped negotiate the final terms, was promoted to his position. The Vrex Consortium survived, but it would never be the dominant force it once was. The Terran Trade Collective had proven that alternatives existed, and species across the galaxy began demanding better terms from their trading partners. Dr. Elizabeth Okonkwo stood in the observation deck of Geneva Station 3 weeks after the agreement was signed, watching the transport ships return from Vrex space. 47,000 people coming home. Admiral Park joined her, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and disappointment. "I really wanted to use the fleet." "I know," Okonkwo said, "but this was cleaner. No casualties, no interstellar incident, no justification for retaliation. You humiliated them instead." "That might be worse." "Good." There was no warmth in Okonkwo's voice. "Let it be a lesson. You don't steal from humanity, not our people, not our homes, not our future." Ambassador Torres approached from behind. "The Secretary General wants to discuss expanding the TTC. We've had 15 more species request membership terms." "Tell them we'll review their applications," Okonkwo said. "But remind them we're not building another consortium. We're building something better. Transparent, fair, with real accountability." She turned back to the window, watching the transports dock. Somewhere in those ships, Governor Patricia Whitmore was probably preparing to return to her colony to rebuild what had been taken. "Do you think they'll try something like this again?" Torres asked. "The Vrex or someone else?" "Probably," Okonkwo admitted. "We're still the newcomers, still the species that doesn't quite fit the galactic mold. Someone will always try to test us to see how far they can push. And when they do," Okonkwo's smile was cold and satisfied, "then we'll teach them the same lesson we taught the Vrex. You can have the biggest fleet, the oldest civilization, the most sophisticated legal system in the galaxy, but if you threaten humanity's people, we will find your weakness, we will exploit it, and we will dismantle everything you've built to get our people back." Admiral Park nodded slowly. "Economic warfare. The most effective kind," Okonkwo said, "because it doesn't look like war at all, it looks like business. And by the time you realize you're under attack, you've already lost." Far across the galaxy, in the rebuilt council chambers on Vrex Prime, Trade Master Thelm reviewed the new contract standards his people had been forced to accept. The reforms would cost the consortium billions in lost revenue, but they'd survive. Barely. He thought about the humans and their terrifying patience. The way they'd spent years preparing for a conflict they didn't know was coming. The way they'd turned the consortium's own weapons against them. Other species had challenged consortium authority before. They'd fought with fleets, with sanctions, with angry protests. They'd all failed because they were playing by the consortium's rules. The humans had simply rewritten the rules entirely. Thelm began drafting his first official report as trade master. It would be distributed to every consortium member, every trading partner, every species that did business in this sector of space. The title was simple: Economic Interactions with Humanity, a Comprehensive Warning. The report's conclusion would be even simpler: do not steal from them. Do not threaten them. Do not assume their youth as a spacefaring species means they are naive. Humans have been waging economic warfare against each other for 10,000 years. They are better at it than we are. Learn from our mistake. The report was filed. The warning was sent. And across the galaxy, species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers began to realize something terrifying. The humans weren't learning galactic rules. They were teaching new ones.